You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to lesbian fiction. You can find a buy link and more information about this book in the show notes. Enjoy!
Hi, my name's Wendy Hudson, and today I'm going to read for you the prologue from my new book, Mine to Keep. He sat below a patch of leafy birch trees, the late spring sun glittering down through the yellows and greens. The paper in his hand remained unread. Instead, he watched as his wife wandered the garden, their 5-month-old daughter in her arms. Starlings danced overhead, their chatter loud and shrill. He saw her stop to point skywards at them, murmuring in his daughter's ear. They were both smiling, a rare sight, and he closed his eyes a moment to log the memory and enjoy the calm. Her voice brought him back to the garden. "I'm going to head up to the house. She needs feeding." He nodded and gave her a half-smile, and then head back again and shook open the paper. A shriek snapped his head from the sports page. He saw her in mid-flight, arms curling around his daughter as they tumbled towards the paved footpath. He was on his feet, moving with arms outstretched, nowhere near close enough to catch them. The thud of impact forced his eyes closed again for a moment. The blood rushed in his ears and his heart pounded double speed as the world righted itself. There was no sound from the baby, only cries from his wife. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, matting the blonde, downy hair on his daughter's head. He knelt down and pulled at his wife's arms. "Let her go, you stupid fucking bitch. What have you done? Let me see her." Eventually he prized his daughter free and bundled her into his arms. Her face was white, eyes wide open, and there was a small smear of blood on her chin. It only seemed to be a graze, but he touched her all over, feeling her head for bumps, her limbs for awkward angles. All the while she stared at him, still and quiet with shock. Is she okay? I'm so sorry." His wife stayed sat on the ground, holding a sleeve to the cut on her head. He glared down at her. "No thanks to you. What the fuck? I know you're useless, but now you can't even walk up the path without falling over? What if she bashed her head, eh?" "She didn't. I'm sure she didn't. I protected her. Let me see her." She made to get up, but he hugged his daughter to him and moved away. "You protected her? Are you an idiot? You could have killed her." Spittle flew from his mouth as he screamed the last sentence. A cry came from the bundle in his arms, and he realised how tight he was holding the child. "Calm yourself." She was on her feet now, dusting off her flowered dress. "It was an accident. Obviously I didn't do it on purpose." He breathed heavily, fury building towards his wife at her casual manner. "Oh, really? There seems to be a lot of those lately. Can you really be that clumsy?" He watched her eyes narrow. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Don't play the fucking innocent. You've wanted to hurt her from day one. I can see the way you look at her. Jealous she gets all my attention now." "That's absurd. That's your own crazy insecurities talking. I love my daughter." She held out her free arm. "Give her to me." He jiggled on the spot as the small cries continued. Smoothing a hand over the back of the baby's head, he tucked her close under his chin. "No fucking chance. And don't you dare put this on me. What about when I get home from work and she's screaming her head off while you sit and watch shit on the telly? Christ." She heaved a sigh and looked off to the distance before closing her eyes. When she looked back, her frustration with him was palpable, and that irked him more. "I've explained that to you. She's fed, watered, dry, and safe. It's about her learning to self-soothe." He watched her wince as she swapped sleeves, the blood from her head soaking through it almost immediately. "Safe? Are you fucking kidding me? You bloody just bashed her face on the pavement. For all I know, this kind of shit goes on all the time when I'm not here. How the hell am I supposed to go to work and trust you to take care of her?" He watched her look at the baby in his arms and then up at him. She looked him square in the eye and spoke through gritted teeth. "Keep pushing me, and it'll be an empty house you come home to." Wrong answer. The blood roared in his ears as he glared back at her, neither of them backing down. She'd lose. She always lost, but it didn't stop the bitch from trying. constantly undermining him, insulting him, threatening him, needling away at him, pushing and pushing over and over, until the raw was overbearing and he had to let it loose. He made to move towards her, never breaking her stare, until a small hiccup from his arms drew both her attention to the wriggling bundle. The noise in his head calmed, but he knew he couldn't let her away with it. It was one threat too far, a kick to the sorest part of his soul, and the bitch knew it. She was asking for it. He spoke quietly, injecting some concern into his tone. "I'm taking her inside. Stay here. I'll bring something for your head." She didn't argue, only moved to sit on the grass, watching him go. Once inside, he laid his daughter in her playpen, checking her over once again. He drew some warm water into a bowl and dipped a soft cloth in it to gently clean her chin. She smiled up at him and he cooed along with her, washing the blood from her hair before placing her favourite stuffed bear in her arms. "Daddy will be right back, sweetheart. You're safe now." He marched outside, down the steps to the path, never breaking his stride until he was over her, looking down at her pathetic face. He spoke low as the anger simmered. "Do you really think I'd let you leave?" She huffed out an exaggerated breath, a half smile on her face. "What are you going to do? Lock me up like you did with your first wife?" That caught him off guard. He stepped back. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Oh, don't play dumb with me. She wrote to me, you arsehole, back when we first got together. Only I was too stupid to believe her. I thought she was being a typical jealous ex, because my sweet, handsome husband would never do something like that." "She's a liar," he seethed, the fire in his stomach burning up through his chest as the anger became desperate to boil over. She stood and closed the gap between them. "No, you are." His vision blurred and the rest of her words were muffled, then cut off. His hands were moving of their own accord, wrapping themselves around her throat, squeezing tighter and creating the blessed silence he craved. Then the fire was in his groin as her knee connected with it. He tumbled sideways, howling at the sky and clutching himself. As his focus returned, he could see her running away from the house, away from him. The pain disappeared as he zoned in on her. Back on his feet, he picked up speed as he ran her down. The river came into view as he grabbed a handful of her hair. Then he was dragging her, her screams barely penetrating his mind. He knew what needed to be done. 20 feet, 15, 10. He didn't stop, not even when they reached the river's edge. She clawed at him as he waded in amongst the reeds. The frigid water quickly soaked them both. Then the screams stopped. He watched her panicked eyes stare up at him through the murkiness. They were mesmerizing, and he couldn't tear his own gaze away. Faint clouds of blood dispersed themselves from her head, and her feet thrashed as he pushed her deeper until she connected with the muddy riverbed. He couldn't stop now. She was meant to be different from the last, his salvation, his second chance. Fuck, he had tried his best to make it work, to at last have the family he deserved. But she had failed him at every turn, just like his disappointment of a first wife. Back then he had allowed himself to be pushed around and had given up the day she had eventually walked out. Well, not this time. This time he was in control, and she would obey him. Her life was his to take. With his knee on her chest and a vice grip around her neck, he watched captivated as the breath left her in garbled bubbles. They forced their way out, furious at first, until time stretched from seconds to minutes, and she was finally, blissfully still. Then she was limp and lifeless. He hooked her arms under hers and waded out further. The river rose to his chest and the current pulled at his feet, but he stood firm. Her glassy eyes still chided him, dared him to do his worst. Well, he had this time. She'd used the last of her chances. He released her body to the river and set himself free. "Let's see you take her away from me now."
This was an episode of Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to new books with a short reading. Get the book now by clicking on the buy link in the show notes. This link works for Amazon US, UK and Canada. If you use our links, we earn a small commission from Amazon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to this podcast.